The technical name for the plug on your headphones is a phone connector. Not headphone, just phone, short for telephone. Under military specification MILDTL642F, the United States still classifies it as a telephone plug, designated for use in telephone switchboard consoles, telegraph circuits, and teletype systems. Even the word headphone predates personal music entirely, because early telephone operators wore listening devices over their ears to monitor and route calls, not to listen to songs. That 3.5mm jack sitting in a pair of earbuds traces back to January the 28th, 1878, when a Civil War veteran named George Coy opened the world's first commercial telephone exchange in the Boardman Building in New Haven, Connecticut. Coy built his switchboard from carriage bolts, handles from teapot lids, and bustle wire, and 21 subscribers paid $1.50 a month to use it. The connectors, those operators use to patch one caller to another, are the direct ancestors of the plug you used this morning. Most people carry a reasonable enough assumption that a company like Sony designed the headphone jack sometime in the mid-20th century, specifically for music, and that the miniaturized 3.5mm version was the original. None of that is true. Western Electric, the manufacturing arm of the Bell system, engineered the original connector at a 1/4-inch, 6.35mm. In 1878, Charles Scribner patented what he called a spring jack, a connector that opened a switch contact when a plug was inserted. Scribner received U.S. Patent 293198 in February of 1884 for a jackknife connector, named for its resemblance to a pocket clasp-knife, and that resemblance is the reason we still call the receptacle a jack. Every one of Scribner's patents was assigned to the phone company. Switchboard operators plugged and unplugged connections hundreds of times a shift, which meant the connector had to survive constant wear, latch securely without slipping out, and never require the operator to check which side was up. Every element of the design, the tapered barrel, the tactile click, the perfectly round cross-section, was engineered for speed and endurance on a telephone switchboard, and no audio engineer in the century that followed could build anything better for the same cost. By September of 1878, the first female operator, Emma Nutt, had reported for work in Boston, earning $10 a month for a 54-hour workweek. That same 1/4-inch design Scribner had patented was still connecting calls in 1950, when over 342,000 switchboard operators worked for the Bell telephone system alone, with another million staffing private switchboards in offices, hotels, and apartment buildings across the country. The 3.5mm version arrived not because music demanded it, but because transistor radios needed something smaller. Sony released the TR-63 in March of 1957, the first pocket-sized transistor radio and the first Sony-branded product exported to North America, and it shipped with a 3.5mm earphone jack, a shrunken telephone plug, mono, 2 conductors, wired for voice-grade audio from a tiny speaker. Over 100,000 units sold. Company salesmen reportedly wore custom-made shirts with slightly bigger pockets because the radio was a touch too large to fit in a standard one. For 22 years, the 3.5mm jack stayed mono, a miniaturized telephone connector doing roughly the same job in a smaller package. That changed on July 1st, 1979, when Sony released the Walkman TPS-L2 in Japan for 33,000 yen. Sony predicted 5,000 units a month, but the Walkman sold 30,000 in its first 2 months, forcing the 3.5mm connector into stereo production at mass scale for the first time by adding a ring contact between the tip and sleeve to separate left and right channels. The format the world now treats as a music standard became one only at that moment. And this is where it gets stranger. The original Walkman came with 2 headphone jacks because co-founder Masaru Ibuka assumed people would want to share the experience. Nobody did, and later models dropped the second jack, but the single 3.5mm stereo connector that remained went on to sell in over 250 million Walkman units worldwide, becoming the universal standard across every portable device that followed. In September of 2016, Apple removed the 3.5mm jack from the iPhone 7. The global controversy was about a connector that had been routing telephone calls since 1878.